the Formed Book Club. Catholic book lovers unpacking good books, chapter by chapter.
Welcome to the Formed Book Club. Now, as you probably know, these are recorded. And I want to mention two things about the temporality here. One is we record on Thursdays, which is a good day for us, except that at Ignatius Press on Tuesday and Thursday, we have Mass 11:45, followed by lunch. And we had two wonderful guests for lunch today. And of course, we're serving them my bread and my wine, as well as other things. And when it becomes a kind of a festive lunch, and I feel I don't want my guests to drink all by themselves. So by the end of the lunch, we come up here, and I'm ready to hand it over to Vivian and Joseph to carry the burden. But it's also the week before Christmas, so we're taking Christmas break, as some of you are too. So you'll be seeing this if you're here. Well, obviously you're watching it, otherwise you wouldn't hear me. But Happy New Year, because this will be our new year, our first recording episode of the new year. And we are still discussing this wonderful book by G.K. Chesterton, Orthodoxy. We've made it through to page 66 in the chapter on the ethics of Elfland, which is one of the really central chapters in terms of how popular it is and how much it's been quoted. But I need to turn this over to you two now. And I'll just be a fly on the wall, but maybe a talking fly from time to time.
Well, I guess we'll probably be wrapping up this chapter. And right before we do, I was realizing as I was coming to the end of it, this is really another take on that theme that came out a few decades ago. You might recall this book that was titled, All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. Because this chapter is really about the things, the lessons that G.K. Chesterton learned when he was just a young boy that proved to be wiser than the wisdom of the world and helped steer his ship aright and right into the Catholic Church eventually. But in any case, Joseph, for that little aside, I'll let you.
Yes, indeed. And actually, your words made me think of William Blake, because William Blake put out a volume of poetry called Songs of Innocence, which are full of innocent poems. And then he, about 3 or 4 years later, he brought out a volume, Songs of Experience, which are much more cynical. So the idea is that innocence and experience are opposites, right, are opposed to each other. But in actual fact, what we see in this chapter, I think, is that what Chesterton found is his innocence was confirmed by experience. That as he grew up and grew in maturity, he realized that the most important things were the things he did learn in kindergarten, as you say. So, so if we can reconvene on page 66, the final paragraph there, and I'm going to read the first 3 sentences, because this is a sentence, a part of this chapter, whenever I teach it, that prompts me to ask a question of my students that rarely they actually get to answer, which surprises me. So, but modern thought also hit my second human tradition. It went against the fairy feeling about strict limits and conditions. The one thing it loved to talk about was expansion and largeness. Herbert Spencer, so he's an atheist philosopher, Herbert Spencer would have been greatly annoyed if anyone had called him an imperialist, and therefore it is highly regrettable that nobody did. But he was an imperialist of the lowest type. He popularized this contemptible notion that the size of the solar system ought to overawe the spiritual dogma of man. Why should a man surrender his dignity to the solar system any more than to a whale? If mere size proves that man is not the image of God, then a whale may be the image of God. So I'll stop there. And the question I posit to my students at this point is, in what sense can we be considered larger than the sun? And you see them all looking at each other, students, and they're thinking about it. And well, obviously we're not larger than the sun. It's a stupid question, right? We're minuscule compared to the sun, and we have all the energy the sun has. We have no energy by comparison. It's it's much bigger. But I said, well, but you can see the sun. The sun can't see you. You know, you can measure the distance to the sun. The sun can't do that. The sun's it's big, but it's an inanimate object. You can measure it. You can write a sonnet to it. The sun can't do any of those things. So there's a sense in which you're much infinitely and eternally larger than the sun, and that I think inverts this whole idea of Herbert Spencer that pure physical size somehow destroys metaphysical truth. It clearly does not.
Well, also, we can contain the sun within us without destroying it by our knowledge, because to know the sun means the sun is in some way present to us, right? Like the whole cosmos is. But the sun can't contain us within it without destroying us. So there's something where man is a mirror of the universe. We can contain it within ourselves. Two things also, Joseph, which you and both Vivian mentioned this, about kindergarten and Chesterton's experience confirming what he learned as a child. I think Chesterton is a wonderful example of the mandate of Jesus. Unless you become like a child, you can't enter the kingdom. Mm-hmm. But becoming like a child does not mean, as you said, Joseph, doesn't mean childish, but to be able to maintain the childish innocence and wonder and common sense, let's say, also, while growing in experience. That's the goal, it seems to me. And then secondly, you started a paragraph after what I wanted to quote in page 66.
Sorry.
Now, maybe we've done this before, but you talked about, in that paragraph on the bottom there, his second human tradition. But above that, this is my first conviction made by the shock of my childish emotions meeting the modern creed in mid-career. I'd always vaguely felt facts to be miracles in the sense that they were wonderful. Now I began to think that miracles in the stricter sense that they were willful. I mean that they were or might be repeated exercises of some will. So that is, why do things repeat themselves in nature? Well, there's a law. Well, where'd the law come from? God, the author of the law, says, I want to do it again. In short, I'd always believed that the world involved magic. That's the first part of this chapter, right? Now I thought that perhaps it involved a magician. And this pointed a profound emotion, always present and subconscious, that this world of ours has some purpose. And if there's a purpose, there's a person. I'd always felt life first as a story, and if there's a story, there's a storyteller. I mean, that really kind of sums up that first part of this chapter of his whole idea of fairy tales and how true they are.
And you know, when you deprive children of these two truths, A, that there is a someone behind everything giving it purpose, and B, it's not just a large mass of meaningless matter that just makes you smaller than an insect and therefore less meaningful than the grandeur of it. You give children those two things instead of, you don't give children a God who loves them and a purpose to things. What are they left with? Well, this very question is what opens that famous film, Rebel Without a Cause. Have you ever seen that movie?
Years and years ago.
So
James Dean?
Yes, James Dean. Oh, my goodness.
James Dean, yeah.
James Dean, amazing actor. But how does that film open? It opens with the high school kids on a field trip to the Griffith Observatory in LA. And I've been there many times because I've family down there, and there's wonderful hikes and trails all around. There's mountains and amazing views. But anyway, the film opens at the Griffith Observatory, and these high school kids are inside the planetarium with a presentation on what? The hugeness and meaninglessness of the cosmos. That's how the film begins. And of course, these kids all leave just kind of dazed and demoralized, and then as the story unfolds, but that's how it starts.
Yeah, well, if there's not a cause, you may as well be a rebel without a cause, right? I mean, that sort of
Exactly.
sets up the theme for the whole movie.
It does.
The other thing I want to say, by the way, about my first quote about we're larger than the cosmos, larger than the sun, we're also longer than the cosmos and longer than the sun, in the sense, of course, that the cosmos is temporal. It exists within time, and we are destined to exist beyond time, right? In eternity. So in that sense, also, we're larger than the cosmos.
Larger and longer.
Larger and longer than the cosmos. And the next thing I have, if none of you are going to trump me, is in the middle of page 67. I want to address a passage which is very influential upon Tolkien.
Well, I see a lot of markings in Vivian's book.
That's right, but I actually have the middle of 67 here, so go
ahead,
for
Joseph.
it.
Yeah, so I'm going to begin about halfway down. These people, so a sentence or two into the first full paragraph there. These people seem to think it's singularly inspiring to keep on saying that the prison was very large. The size of the scientific universe gave one no novelty, no relief. The cosmos went on forever, but not in its wildest constellation could there be anything really interesting. Anything, for instance, such as forgiveness or free will. The grandeur or infinity of the secret of its cosmos added nothing to it. It was like telling a prisoner in Reading jail that he would be glad to hear that the jail now covered half the county. The warder would have nothing to show the man except more and more long corridors of stone lit by ghastly lights and empty of all that is human. So these expanders of the universe had nothing to show us except more and more infinite corridors of space lit by ghastly suns and empty of all that is divine. Apart from that being a wonderful passage in itself, it's echoed by Tolkien in his famous lecture and essay on fairy stories, which comes about 30 years after this was written. Tolkien obviously knew this, and he talks about one of the important features of fairy stories is escape, capital E, and the idea is to escape from the mere prison of materialism. And he says that the materialists look upon the escape as an act of treachery, right? Because there's nothing but the prison. To try to escape from it is treasonable. And he says, he talks about the Third Reich would see this, to try to escape from it, as being treacherous. He says, well, in actual fact, why is it wrong for someone in a prison to think of things other than prison bars and warders? Why can't they think about stars and things beyond? So this is Tolkien, I think, taking up this theme that he I suspect first read in this passage of Orthodoxy.
Yes, something that I've always enjoyed is reading whom I think are the three great Christian writers, literary personages of the 20th century, namely Chesterton, Lewis, and Tolkien. Often the same themes are being treated in different ways. And sometimes I'm sure it's independently treating the same theme, but other times I'm also sure it's dependence upon the other or an influence, But the way they treat the same themes, all of them profoundly, but in a different register or a different perspective or different coloration, whatever. It's really fascinating. It's just a wonderful intellectual treat to see, as you say in this example, where Tolkien talks about escape from the prison we're in, and Chesterton talks about that scientific prison. Yeah.
I'd like to just add one little qualification to this idea of escape, because I hope it's not an maybe it'll be, I don't know, but to a modern ear, that word escape it can often be mistaken for just oblivion. Like, when people take drugs, for example, to get high, they're seeking a state of kind of obliviousness, a state of just emptiness, to escape from the pain of life, the difficulties of life, or whatever. But the kind of escape they're talking about is,
right,
this escape into good fantasy literature that actually broadens your imagination and helps you to thereby see the world that you're in and your life experience in a new light. You're not escaping from your experience, you're actually entering it more deeply, surprisingly, when you read good escapist fantasy literature.
Well, yeah, to escape from the prison in Tolkien's and Chesterton's sense is to escape from a prison. In other words, that the fullness of reality is not it's not constrained within the confines of the prison. That the fullness of reality is something which exists beyond and without the prison. That's the sort of escape they mean. But I agree, there's another sort of escapism is oblivion, where you don't try to escape from the prison, you sort of hide yourself in the corner under the bed, in a sort of constricted understanding of yourself, and take drugs or other things to make your misery more tolerable. And that's obviously the opposite of what Tolkien and Lewis are saying. Yeah.
But in this sense, everybody seeks escape in some sense, because when we experience pain or suffering or loss or feebleness or finitude, we want to get. There's different ways of escaping.
Right.
One, you go to sleep. One, you get drunk. One, you go on drugs. One, you read fantasy literature. One, you read fairy tales. And he's saying it's the fairy tales which give you the clue of the fact this is a prison, all right, but there's something bigger, something better, something beyond that we can hope for in the future. So I think that the desire to escape is common to everybody at some time.
Yes.
But what that escape should be, for Buddhists, is nirvana. Well, let's just get rid of all of our desires and all of our emotions, and let's be stoic in the Greek sense. But that's an escape into something really worse. You lose your humanity in that kind of escape, as opposed to escape into a future that somehow is being prepared for us. Eye is not seen, ear is not heard. It has entered the mind of man. That's an escape which is nourishing and fulfilling.
In the same way that worship is an escape, right? In other words, there's portals into a reality that's bigger than the reality we perceive. And
you think about the Salve Regina, that this vale of tears, this land of exile. Well, worship is a desire for home, right? To escape from exile in order to come home. Well, that the exile is the prison, right? And heaven is the home. Well, that's something much larger and much more real than the exile. So this is a perfect example, an image of escaping into something which is more real than the situation we find ourselves in.
Well, here's a little anecdote, an experience of mine, which is a different kind of escape, not from something prison-like, but for something which is good and something better. I was on a flight in a small plane from Vancouver, British Columbia, to Bella Coola, British Columbia, in the Canadian Rockies. And this priest and I were sitting together in a small plane. We were praying the Divine Office together, Office of Readings. We were going through this kind of a gorge that had glacial snow coming on both sides and glacial tarns, and the trees coming up, and the sky was blue. We're sitting there praying, and I'm looking out the window thinking, if I had to die, I wouldn't mind crashing into all this beauty. So I wasn't trying to escape pain, and I wasn't trying to commit suicide. I was just saying that beauty is so glorious. What it would be like to be just, annihilated into it, Anyway, that's my little anecdote. Sort of relates to this, but
a mystical moment. I like that. I know we're not making much progress here, but a comment you made about this dynamic relationship between Chesterton, Tolkien, and Lewis. When I was doing the research for my book, Literary Converse, I interviewed Barbara, forgotten her name, who finished the translation of the Divine Comedy when Dorothy Sayers died.
Oh yeah.
But she said that these great figures of the Catholic revival were like a network of minds and a network of grace energizing each other. And I think that when you talk about Tolkien, Lewis, and Chesterton, you can talk about this network of minds, this network of grace, which energizes each other and thereby catalytically the rest of us.
Mm-hmm. And then we just take those jumper cables and put them on our batteries and get a jolt to keep going. Yeah.
I like your metaphor. Well, I have nothing else towards the bottom of page 69, so I'm sure that you will have something before then.
Before 69?
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, but doesn't necessarily mean I have to bring anything up. Yeah.
Well, no, but you put an X there and a circle around it.
Right. Well, yeah, when he says the whole attitude was even shallower than could have been expected. Sometimes these people who think they're just so profound about the meaninglessness and the vastness of it all and the purposelessness of it all, and actually it's a much shallower understanding.
So anything else before 6 lines up from the bottom of page 69?
Well, I got a few more lines up there, maybe 12 lines up.
Okay.
His exhortation to us: it is a good exercise in empty or ugly hours of the day to look at anything. The coal scuttle or the bookcase. Think how happy one could be to have brought it out of the sinking ship onto the solitary island. So, and that's the thing. Chesterton had that appreciation for anything which existed,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Well, is the shipwreck where you were going, Joseph, when you said the bottom of 69?
Not ship. Well, I mean, it's a continuation of that idea. I was going to take it up from Men Spoke Much in My Boyhood. I'll carry on.
Well, then between there, he says, but it is a better exercise still to remember how all things have had this hairbreadth escape. Everything's been saved from a wreck. Mm-hmm. Every man has one horrible adventure. As a hidden, untimely birth, he had not been. As infants that never see the light. Now your paragraph there.
Well, carry on, Father, to the end of the paragraph. You're reading already.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, men spoke much in my boyhood of restricted or ruined men of genius, and it was common to say that many a man was a great might have been. To me, it is a more solid and startling fact that any man in the street is a great might not have been. I just love that. This whole idea of really the battle between pride and humility is a battle between ingratitude and gratitude, right? That humility is just recognizes that how many things we should be grateful for, from the bookcase, right, from the coal scuttle, to everything in our existence. We should be full of gratitude. Whereas if you have pride, then everything is meaningless. Nothing has any value because nothing has ultimately any meaning. And that, to me, is that ultimate war between humility and its absence, pride.
Yes, and I am Chestertonian in this sense that unlike him, I have a very poor visual imagination, and I don't feel any emotional attachment to God or even to Jesus. Actually, to me, it's more theological. It's more theoretical. But I'm in the chapel, making an effort to pray, get distracted, and I look at the needle in front of me, made of wood. I said, well, every molecule in that piece of wood is known to God right now. Every atom in there, every quark. And if he wasn't thinking about it, loving it, it wouldn't be here at all. And so that's kind of my, access to God. I don't have the more human access, the more scientific access. That, every time a leaf falls from a tree or the snow comes down, we can never figure out the trajectory of those things. But God knows that every tiniest particle and motion in the universe forever, he knows it and loves it. To me, that just blows my mind away. And then, of course,
I would say one thing. I think you're doing yourself an injustice, Father, if I may say so, because I've known you for quite a few years now, and you show a great deal of emotion, and particularly about things related to the divine and the incarnate. And you mentioned about the fact looking out the window in that small plane at the beauty of the glaciers and wanting to melt into that majestic beauty. This is not something which is purely empirical and theological.
Okay. I'm emotional. I admit I'm emotional, but it's not personal. It's not It's not like, well, of course, emotional persons too. I get angry at her sometimes, and she gets angry with me. Yeah, we can go at it sometimes. All right, well, we'll leave my interior life out of this for now. I just thought I'd mention that this idea of finding joy and good and beauty, in every little thing with coal scuttle or molecule. Mm-hmm. That's Chestertonian. That's human. What he does, basically, Chestertonian is the ultimate human in the sense that he expresses what really it means to be human as a creature of God.
Yeah, if I might quibble with Chesterton, one of my favorite quotes by Chesterton is one that I sort of lately I've been sort of thinking I don't completely agree with, which is a bit disconcerting. It's connected this, this great might have been, this great might not have been. He said when he said that we don't live in the best of all possible worlds, we live in the best of all impossible worlds, which is, of course, which is beautiful because we live in a miracle. We're in the midst of a miracle, right? What we're living in is not possible; it's miraculous. But my quibble is we don't live in the best of all possible worlds because clearly heaven is a better world than this is. There are flaws and brokenness in this, which is connected to the fact that we're made to love and we're treacherous. So it's not the best of all possible worlds. That's my one quibble. But the point is that to say we live in the best of all possible worlds is not true. But it's also not quite true that we live in the best of all impossible worlds. But we are living in the midst of a miracle. That's the key thing.
Well, let me quibble with your quibble just a bit, because you are true in terms of appearances. But Paul says our lives are hidden with Christ in God now, so that we actually are living right now in heaven, in the best of all possible worlds. It just haven't been revealed yet what we're already doing now. As St. John says, we are children of God, but what we are has not yet been manifested, but we're already there. It's not like we're going to be somewhere else. It's going to be where we really are, but we'll finally know it. So, yeah. But I think,
I appreciate your quibble with my quibble, and my quibble about your quibble about my quibble is that this takes us back to von Balthasar, and if of course we're all destined ultimately to be saved, then I can agree with your quibble with my quibble. But if there's a possibility, of course, of souls going to hell, then there's certainly a lack of the best of all possible scenarios in the fact that we can refuse the best of all possible scenarios.
Well, that's good. I'm going to quibble with you.
Is this
quibble to the fifth power?
I was just going to say, what power are we at? Exponential power.
It nevertheless, it does not negate what Paul says, that our lives right now are hidden with Christ in God.
Right.
Now, it may be just as the angels fell from heaven, we too can fall from heaven, even though we are now in heaven without it being manifested.
There you go.
Yes.
How about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not going to argue with that quibble because I agree with that quibble.
Okay, good. We stop the quibbles.
Also,
we're on the final page of this chapter. It might be good to try to.
Well, you know what? We actually summed up page 70 at the beginning of this chapter.
We did actually, I remember. But do you want to perhaps if you want, Vivian, as we're almost at our time anyway, if you want to revisit because I think you did that. I think you began with the conclusion. Maybe we can finish as the last shall be first and the first shall be last, so to speak. Finish as we began.
Okay. Well, again, this chapter can be summed up. Everything I needed to know, I learned in kindergarten, and he just goes through the list of what he learned early on that just got confirmed in his adulthood. First, that this world doesn't explain itself, and therefore it has some explanation beyond itself, and that it's magical. Second, the magic must have a meaning, and a meaning must have someone to mean it, meaning it's someone, meaning God, maker. Third, that this purpose, beautiful in its old design, in spite of its defects. So back to that best possible world stuff, it sure is beautiful in spite of its defects. Fourth, that the proper form of thanks is some form of humility and accepting limits. And last and strangest, there had come to my mind a vague and vast impression that in some way all good was a remnant to be stored and held sacred out of some primordial ruin. And this goes back to the shipwreck metaphor. He sees us as all survivors of some wreck. And now, like Robinson Crusoe, being grateful for every little thing that we've managed to save from the wreck, because it might not have been here if it had gone down to the bottom of the sea. And so this primordial ruin, so here he is full of all this appreciation of beauty and everything else. And yet he sees the flaw. He sees the brokenness. He sees the incompleteness. And yet he can still be full of joy.
Amen.
Wonderful. This was a great episode. I hope someone's watching or listening. Yeah. God bless you all. We'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed this discussion, please help spread the word about the Forum Book Club by subscribing to the podcast and writing a review. You can sign up for weekly updates at forumedbookclub.ignatius.com.